The Great Recession started in 2007, and I was under the impression that it all dealt with mortgage loans. And I took a business ethics class, and they said that the bankers were getting bonuses for issuing out these high volume of loans, and I thought it was mostly their fault. But as I studied, I learned that it digs deeper in history than that, going all the way back to the early 1980s. The 1980s started the consumer age, where there was a huge rise in spending, but there wasn't that much of a rise in income. The way people were able to spend this money is that there was more consumer debt, where they were borrowing more money. The majority of that debt was mortgage loans. People were taking out all these mortgages, and because of that, housing prices were going up, and everything was working out. Also, at that time, the Chinese economy was growing, and there was more of their money being funneled into the United States, because the Chinese, their culture was more frugal, and instead of spending the money, they were saving the money, and indirectly that money was going to the United States. Well, because of all these mortgages, interest rates started to drop, and because interest rates were low, investors started going after riskier investments, trying to get higher returns. Well, because of that, more subprime loans were being issued, and also during that time, commodities and food prices were steadily rising, and income still not rising as fast as the price of living was rising. And because of that, people who were barely making these mortgage payments were forced to decide between paying their mortgage and feeding their families. Well, of course, they've got to feed their families, so they were walking away from these mortgages. And because of that, the housing prices quit rising, and they began to fall. And then you have other people who owed more money than what the houses were worth, so they started walking away from mortgages because they just didn't want to pay it, because it's more than what their homes were worth. And because of that, the market crashed, and we had a huge recession, the biggest recession since the Great Depression. And banks were forced to be bailed out. The economy shrank, and it took 2 years to get out of the recession. And a lot of it had to do with bank regulations. They lifted bank regulations, trying to give bankers more leeway with lending money, but in hindsight, it was a bad thing to deregulate.